The Banking Scene Director's Cut goes behind the scenes, sharing stories and insights to help you build the bank of tomorrow.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome, Jasper, Head of Product Open Banking at Rabobank. Perhaps the first question for our audience, could you briefly explain, how long have you been involved in the open banking space before we dig deeper into your vision on the future of open banking?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I work at Rabobank now for 2 years. Before I worked 10 years as a product, in different product roles for specific fintech companies. So I don't consider myself necessarily as a banker in that sense. So maybe I also have a bit of a different view on some topics. So more than 2 years intensely or heavily involved, of course, within my current role. And before that, as a fintech, we were involved at the birth of PSD2, so to see, and all the chances that we saw, and then we had to get licenses, etc. So I'm an insider, but also a bit of an outsider in that sense. So that might give some relevant,
but definitely with an open mindset towards open banking.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, very positive actually. From a personal perspective.
That's already part of the answer, I think, of question 1. 10 years after PSD2, because that's how long we've been discussing this directive. Looking at open banking today, has it been a success according to you?
A good question also, but that's the key question. I think there are several answers to the question, and also looking, I think we will discuss a bit more in depth later, Rick, on the type of customers. So I think there's a big difference between natural persons or private or particular and business customers. So I think for business customers, it's a success. I think for retail, the natural persons, it's not necessarily a big success as of yet. But I was thinking about this question because I could prepare this a bit. I think the main thing is the paradigm shift, mainly for incumbents.
Mm-hmm.
That really is because PSD2 forced banks to open up, and incumbents and financial institutions to open up their services, but actually customer data. That's also really important to stress. It's in principle, it's not the data of the bank, of course. And open that up. And that's basically what PSD2 forced the whole market to go into the European market. So I think from a paradigm perspective, it is a huge success, actually. So maybe business-wise, not too much, differs on the customer groups. But looking at the paradigm shift and the change in the industry, I think it has been a success after 10 years.
Yeah, I think it's essentially that. Maybe some insights from the research I did. Because back in 2019, 2020, I had a similar series of interviews. And what I noticed there, especially from, I think in terms of Dutch banks, the ones who were very pro open banking have kept building on the proposition. But in Belgium, I have the impression that quite a few organizations who told me how disruptive open banking would be, at the end, didn't do much more than what the directive obliged. So what you saw is they did the compliance APIs, whatever is needed, and they had that belief that would completely disrupt the market. But after evaluation, made a decision that that's probably not the case, and they completely cooled down the investments in open banking, with one big exception, and that is, I think, KBC at this moment.
Yeah, that's I think a very good note or point that you make, Rick. That it differs per country, and I'm of course based out of the Netherlands, and there I think you see, and we probably go into that a bit more. There you see maybe a bit more traction, but also if you look at that, PC2 was also it's a Dutch saying, but we say the ghost of the legislation, but it's basically the mindset of the legislation was also to start more competition. And here you have IGN, Molly, the tech companies that are also really going into APIs now. So that also makes us, I think, more maybe than other countries. I found Belgium, you are
more
much
agile and more aware of the opportunities.
Yeah, more
and
aware
the risks of not doing it.
Yeah, I don't know too much about Belgium, but if I look at Germany, for example, I see Deutsche Bank doing a lot of cool stuff. You had an interview last week I saw with one of their, but outside of that, if I talk to Germans, there's a lot less going on, for example. And I am actually not so aware about Italy, Spain, those countries, what's really happening there.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, maybe what plays in Belgium as well, and then we keep going with the interview. But here we had Isabel already 25 years before PSD2, and Isabel is a banking platform for all the banks to support businesses. And I think, I'm gonna ask about that later in this interview, but you already mentioned in the first question, businesses benefit from it more than consumers do. And maybe that aspect had been covered already before the directive. But before we dig deeper into that, maybe my next question, how would you define open banking APIs, and do you consider them different from the regulatory PSD2 APIs? And why is the differentiation so important according to you?
Yeah, that's also really that's I think excellent build up in this interview. So if you look at like there are three PSD2 APIs: PIS, IS, and CAF, confirmation of funds. The last one is hardly used by any banks, but also we can see that in the data. It's hardly used. The other two are picking up, by the way. So I'm not allowed to share too much, of course, but we can see, of course, how much we are called by other parties, and we see that PSD2 APIs are growing really rapidly over the last year. So that's cool to see.
Okay.
But you have those three APIs, and they form the fundament. And then you had the commercial or the premium APIs. So if you look at Rabobank, but also other banks, they use the core stack of the PC2 APIs and then build premium APIs. And I think it's really important. Like Rabobank, we have over 10 APIs. 3 are PC2 APIs. You can count it. The rest are premium commercial APIs. And what's also really, really important that a lot of people don't get. So I should be aware not to put too much information in this interview, of course. But
no, please do.
Premium APIs, you don't need, but not too much content. Otherwise, maybe it's too content heavy, and everyone will listen to something else. But the premium APIs you can call without having a PSD2 license. So that's a really, really important difference. So, if you can use as an aggregator or a party,
if you have an agreement with Rabobank.
Yeah, exactly. That's so that enables corporates to use your APIs directly without having to go to an aggregator, which is for a lot of companies that bank with one bank doesn't have a lot of value in itself, to say. So there are other use cases for aggregators, and they are really important. But I think this is a really important distinction. And those three APIs were used as basis. And then there's a lot of value created around it because banks saw that there is a lot of value for, especially corporate or business customers, in having these APIs.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really important difference.
Can you perhaps, let's make it a bit more concrete now. Give us a few successful use cases from a Rabobank of open banking, maybe specifically on the premium aspect. And how important was the regulatory framework to build them? What I learned a few times in the past from past interviews was that the regulatory framework obliged banks to build the rails, and that adding more APIs had to make the business case. But how does it look like at Rabobank? And what are the most successful use cases that you see at the moment?
Yeah, this is also so. I think the fundamental rules, but in the PSD2 legislation, there were not a lot of specifications or not a lot of detail on what data, etc., to get. So that was quite quite basic APIs, to say so. And in the Netherlands, but I think that's the same for Belgium, you have a few big banks. So let's say you're a bookkeeping party. Yeah, you basically have to connect to ING, ABN, Rabobank, and then you cover like 90% of the market. So
yeah,
there was a kind of dynamics that you rather all those big software parties that use our APIs rather connect directly to the bank than via an aggregator, for example, because the benefit of an aggregator is that you can have thousands of banks connected via one aggregator, to say so. That was not really the case for the Netherlands. So that made a big difference. Then going to the use case, I don't know about Belgium, Rick, but we have the bookkeeping connection, which is quite long standing already. It also used to be in place at host to host, but you see a rapid pickup there in the recent years. So that's the big success case. So we have a kind of IES, but then the premium API.
And is that specifically for accountancy?
Yeah, that's mainly for bookkeeping packages. So we have quite a lot. So they get in that data from the account to reconcile. So that saves customers tons of time, but they can also initiate payments straight away from their bookkeeping, so they don't have to log on to the bank. Often they approve still those payments and direct debits in the bank environment. And then you see that we added a lot of services there. So direct debit is not part of PC2, for example, so that can be done. Payments can be initiated. We have the verification of payee API that you can check your creditors. Even only Rabobank customers can do that in their bookkeeping package, for example. We have a real-time account notification services, so customers are instantly notified. That's also not part of PSD2. So you see that there is a whole package, and we have 100,000 customers using that. So that's the big success case. It's a bit the old-fashioned bookkeeping connection where people in the Netherlands said, yeah, that existed for a long time, but it's much more improved and much more used through the APIs, because the only thing that a Rabobank customer needs to do, they go to their favorite software package, they click consent, they log into Rabobank, and then they are connected with all of these APIs in one go. So that's a huge success. And that paradigm shift you also see going from bookkeeping packages now to other kind of solutions. More and more.
Can you give a few examples of that? The other solutions?
For example, we work with a notary platform. So we also have a payment request API that's also used by the bookkeeping, by the way. So they put an invoice and then you get a payment link and you can generate codes. So they can instantly send out an invoice with a payment request. We have a notary platform, for example, when people bring in their own funds to buy a house, a notary via their software, and the Rabobank customers are behind that software. So it's a software platform for notary offices, and they can send a payment link via our API to their customers to put in funding for their houses. So that's a very much a use case. And what you of course see in the market,
Where
if you
you
look
can
at,
work with much higher limits than usual.
yeah, exactly. So you can I think
going back to the notary platform, the advantage is that you can work with much higher limits because you have a trusted interface there, I assume.
yeah, higher. That's good that let's maybe dig a bit deeper. So the problems that these notaries had is that the customers had to key in all the data manually. Yeah? So they had to send out a document like you have to pay to this account. Errors can happen. So that's prevented with a payment request. You can pay up to 50,000 euros. So the limits are indeed directly higher. And it's connected to our instant notification service. So the notary knows instantly that it's paid. And people are really stressed when they buy a house. So they tend to call the offers like 100,000 times. And now they automated this. So the money is paid, the customer get confirmation, we got your funds, don't worry, your house is we are going to be okay. It's all settled. So you see, and there are more of these examples. But so you see that the spin-off of the is growing more and more and more. We have more of these.
And do you think that the regulatory framework was important to build all that, or would Rabobank have built it anyway because there was simply a demand in the market without
This
the
is
SE2?
The question is a difficult question, Ray. Maybe one example still, if you look at Shopify, for example, and we are not so active there, but I also see the tech companies moving a lot. When you want to start a web shop, you go to Shopify. You connect instantly to Stripe or iGen, you get a bank account to go along with that. I think the paradigm is going there eventually. So also you open your embedded accounts. We discussed that before. I think that will happen more and more. You see a lot of examples here already. So you buy software of a specific SaaS company for bookkeeping, for notary, for your web shop, whatever, and you get an account, a bank account as a sort of, a lot of bankers don't really like this, but this is, I think, reality where we are going. So your question was, did banks need a regulatory framework, or would Rabo have done this anyway? For Rabo, for me, it's hard to judge, but to be honest, I'm not about the incumbents in general. I'm quite critical there because I don't think they would have moved so fast, at least, maybe eventually, without this regulation. But I think we're also happy that it came into force because we have to fight off the fintechs eventually. And they are much more tech savvy, much more API first thinkers than we are. So it also put us in a place to stay competitive. So that's maybe good.
Interesting. I think the examples that you gave are also, I think they give very good context. My second question was going to be who benefits most of these services, businesses or consumers? And I think you hinted to the answer already a few times, businesses, because consumers have been less adopting the API business. But I think in your examples, of course, there's a business who have the high volume, simply because customers, they don't buy a house every year, every week. But the moment they need a house, it is very convenient to have such an API that they can work in a very trusted environment. So I think having those examples puts this question also in a slightly different context. I think maybe in terms of volume, definitely business advantage more. But I see a lot of benefit for the consumers as well. Will you agree?
Yeah, that's really sharp observation, I think. By making those, because we also have insurance company working with the same payment link. So you didn't pay your energy bill, they send you a payment request, then via our notification services instantly, you know, okay, I paid my bill via the payment link, etc. So you see this and that's more convenient for for the retail customer as well, or the consumers, as you put it. Fully agree, and that's maybe the core thing because we discuss a lot of banks, but the customer benefit is really being where the customer wants you to be. So not necessarily being in the bank app because we like you to be in our app, etc. But really being where the customer is, and I always feel that the best customer journey wins. That's my true conviction, and that's being where the customer is, and the need for businesses is more relevant because they have more volume. For reconciliation already can take sometimes hours a day. That's now automated. You don't have to upload your file information anymore, more like they did. You don't have to download your payments from your bookkeeping or your ERP and upload them into your banking system. That all goes automatically nowadays. And you can manage your cash much easier. So there are a lot of benefits for the business customers, but that also influence the consumers to a big extent.
Yeah. If you look back at the past 10 years, what did we get right and what did we get wrong?
Yeah, also
maybe let's focus more on what did get wrong to build up to the next question afterwards.
Yeah, maybe that's a good one. So if you look at PSD2, and I was always like, okay, banks just have to do it from an outsider perspective that we started and open up the data. But if you're honest, how much other industries regulatory have to publish data via APIs? That's not so much, and also free of charge. So I think there's a big incentive, and not per se that banks are not able to monetize it, but more that there should be a healthy incentive. At the end of the day, everyone needs to earn a bit of money, and you don't have to feel sorry for banks. But they had to spin up this whole infrastructure. It is a lot of work. So no healthy financial input, whatever, to make this work, I think is problematic. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's what I hear a lot. Spoke to another big bank last week as well, who said like it needs to benefit the customer, it needs to benefit the business, and it needs to benefit the bank because otherwise there's no buy-in from the involved stakeholders. Yeah.
And I think that's what then the second thing that was not done well is the lack of specification, but also monitoring of the APIs. So there's a limited specification, so all the user flows are different per bank. If you look at PIS, for example, you can have totally different flows. In Germany, I've heard that sometimes you have to go through your SCA like 2 or 3 times, and the same for Italy, etc. at specific banks. So that's why PIS is not working at this moment. And so the lack of monitoring, but also specifications in the user flow and the APIs, that's also problematic. But then if you couple that to that first point, there's also not really incentives for banks on European level. So I think, honestly, Rabobank does very well there, and we have very good APIs, but there's no incentive for the European banking scene to really pick this up and solve this themselves. Because if there's no financial impulse or whatever at the end of the day, it's very difficult to get this going. So I think those two things they did wrong. And also the monitoring, if you look at PIS, PIS could be, I think in Belgium, Rick, you have Bankcontact, I think. We have Ideal Vero. So that's the account-to-account payment solutions. PIS could really be the European challenger there.
Yeah, Bankcontact is specifically the cards business. I think you're looking at, Vero and Payconic, yeah.
Okay, we also come. Yeah, so but pay by bank, so that's how they call it, by the PIS payment initiation, could have been a real European challenger there. That's always struck me that the regulator didn't pick that up. And I was talking about the digital euro, for example. While for digital payments, you have a solution actually, but just make it work, to say so.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. They're still working on it. Do you think that the PSR, the new payment service regulation, will solve part of the elements that went wrong? Because it is regulation, it's no longer directive. There are a couple of things that are much more specific than PSD2. How do you look at that?
Yeah, the honest answer is still, like we discuss, of course, a lot internally, and the text is still not fully formalized. That's my end. So I've really high level went through it. I spoke to people in the business. So if you talk to aggregators, they are much more positive about this legislation, or they say, okay, there will be much more enforced, there will be much more monitoring, etc. When I talk to a lot of other people, they say, not a lot changed. It's more about fraud prevention, etc. But if you, I'm not sure, but I think they will be more strict on the monitoring of the uptime and the quality of these APIs and the specification. And also they look, in my view, at the user flows. So PIS, how does it check? So I don't know, Rick. It's a bit of speculation. Probably in 2 years we know more, but I think they will focus more on these points that we just said that went wrong, partially. Then
Okay.
so let's see. Yeah. So let's.
Have more speculation for you. Europe is now
Okay.
debating FIDA. I remember Rabobank on stage with us 2 years ago already. No, it was last year. Debating FIDA. And what I remember was a couple of things were definitely good, like, for example, a compensation framework, etc. But on the other hand, there were also quite some elements, like, for example, the magnitude of the directive. So my question to you again, do we need it? And if so, do we need it in its current form? And there, I think the overall conclusion was, yes, we may need it, but not in its current form.
Yeah, good question, Rick. Maybe you are even close because the FIDA went so many times back and forth and changed, and now I think they took the federated approach that everyone. So yeah, I'm not very enthusiastic about that. Also, the whole way it's going back and forth. Then this is included, excluded. A lot of speculation. What's included? You know how that goes in the scene. Then this is included, and we have to. And then okay, it's still not final. What are we going to do, etc. So the pathway towards it is not really that makes me happy. But maybe that's what happens. Like you are longer, I think, involved with this regulatory. So. And if I look at the content, so it's much more included and much more data sharing indeed with a financial framework around it, so or monetizing framework or whatever. Do we need it? I was, of course, again preparing this, Rick, with the change of the paradigm shift. And so if I purely look at the Netherlands, but also the UK, and like I said, I think Belgium is also quite moving forward already with the pressure of the tech firms now coming in. Again, iGen, Molly, Stripe really making waves, also going from PSP services into traditional banking services. I think we get pushed there anyway as a bank, Rick. So because the basic fundament is, that's I think the primary discussion. And then for retail customers and business customers, there might be a difference. So can you still serve these customers in your own app, or do you want to be there where the customer really is? And I think for your retail customers, for you and me, we can still quite well be served in a banking app, and there can be more services there, like KBC is doing, for example, by your train tickets, etc. But for businesses, there are so many types of business that there are in, like so many things you can think about, and the bigger they get, the different the demands are. So it's so difficult to serve them all in one interface, one front end, that I feel and then I think the market's slowly moving there. Also, the banks are slowly moving there. Of course, you have your own channels, you keep them, they are important, but you need to be present where the customer is. So I think the FIDA, the FIDA spirit is slowly in entering into the market. So do you really need it? I'm not sure, and definitely the federated approach, Rick, I don't see a lot of benefits there. So I'm very much in doubt. Let me put it like that.
Good thinking. I hear you say there's a lot of pressure from the Shopify's, IDN's, Mollies of this world. I haven't heard the OpenAIs, the Mistrals, and the Anthropics of this world. What I'm starting to think is that there is a reasonable chance that in the near future, one of those will determine how open banking will look like by partnering one of the big global banks or one of the biggest European banks, that way setting the scene for others to join afterwards. Do you think that the emergence of AI is that making open finance more important or exposing how far behind the industry really is?
That's a very good question.
And it's a very tricky question, of course. That's pure speculation. I'm well aware of that.
Yeah, but it's also vision. I think it's also important to have vision. If you look already at bank channels, you see already. I read a paper about it yesterday, and I don't say that's the case for the Rabobank, of course, but in general, if you look at banks, there's already very scattered image for customers. Customers nowadays have like 7 bank accounts on average with Revolut, etc. So you have to log into all those portals for your interest rates. Maybe you do your pension somewhere else. Even so for corporates, that's even more difficult in that sense. So, and I see Revolut is playing that advantage with the retail customers. They now also integrated to AAS, for example, and they show more bank accounts. They want to be the home bank and then give you insights in your other bank accounts as well. So there you also see the open banking paradigm, that you can see all your accounts bank with HSBC or Barclays as well. You can see that in the Revolut app, the balance, and you can initiate payments via open banking. AI, I think it's even a step further, Rick. So, for me, my personal vision is that that there is a big chance that that maybe for banks it might even be, and incumbents might even be beneficial, because I think, and that's the whole discussion, will it disrupt SaaS software? I don't know. I cannot make that, but you can at least theoretically connect your bookkeeping, your CRM, and your banking package all to your agent or to your AI interface. So you wake up in the morning, Rick, you start in your AI package, and then you see your orders that you need to pay in the morning. You have your own business, and you click on pay, and you go to your bank, you do a strong customer authentication, and you pay. So your orders are connected to your payments, and then maybe also your CRM. So you start in your Rick, you have a conversation with this person, Rick, you need to close this, whatever. And I think probably now you log into 3 systems. I don't know how you do it, but that might all be aggregated via MCP and APIs in an agent. So the image that you're sketching, but only for banks in the beginning, I think there is a realistic chance that it might play out that way. In the US, she already, I think ChatGPT worked with an aggregator to get this data in. So that's also really interesting, Rick. That's now that's now a bit of an what is it? It's definitely not a benefit for banks that PSD2 in that sense is in place. Enabled them, like I said, delivers those APIs to get standardized. But now we have to give data to those AI machines if they work with an aggregator, to those AI agents, for example. So it can already be done. In the US, you see it.
Yeah.
And how it will play out, that's the question here.
As I was thinking during this interview, you talked a lot about bookkeeping, etc. If banks are the ones providing the information to the AI tool, it's still keeping them more in control than when the bookkeeper would do that with the information they got from the bank, because then it's third-party information that's suddenly being shared. So there's probably not a reason for banks to wait once the demand is there.
Excellent analysis.
Sorry.
I think that's an excellent. So I think who has the most value, and we still have those. So banks are, I think, maybe in a better position than before, because the payments will probably also still go via the bank portal, because a lot of parties that work with you as an open bank, they all say, yeah, bank, you are responsible for a payment that goes wrong. So we go to you. Okay, that also involves us being a very important part of those. So I think we have a strong, exactly like you said, a very strong position there. So we shouldn't be afraid as an industry. And maybe it's funny that you said it. Maybe even it solves the orchestration of the PSD2, whatever orchestration. Maybe we leapfrog forward, which is also not, I think, bad in itself.
Yeah. Maybe one last question. Who's really driving open finance today? Is it the regulators, the banks, the fintechs, technology companies, AI providers, or the customers themselves?
Yeah, very, very good question.
And I can already share, I raised something similar on LinkedIn, and there, I think the majority of the voices was a mix of all.
Yeah, that's also maybe a bit of the boring answer, but I think the regulator triggered this, then incumbents picked it up and elaborated on it there. And we have a very positive attitude towards open banking, etc. And we matured it. But now, if I'm honest, I see the tech companies, if I see how fast they develop their APIs and how mature their propositions is, and they have more modern tech stacks, so it's apparently less difficult than I work there for them to spin up APIs, and they think API native. So I think regulator, bank, and now tech companies are taking it over. I think that's a bit of the sequence that we see.
That's the end of my interview. We're more than half an hour later, and I would like to thank you so much for your open conversation, the valuable examples as well, I think, which is probably quite normal, maybe in the Netherlands, definitely within Rabobank, but for the broader community of the banking scene, which is predominantly Belgian, but also Luxembourgish, and to a wider extent European, I think one of these insights are highly valuable. I can't thank you enough for sharing those with us. Thank you so much, Jasper.
Yeah, thank you very much for the excellent questions, Rick, and it was a pleasure to join you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.